Hi, everyone.
Hi.
Joining us. So we have 1 minute to go.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. So thank you very much, distinguished panelists, for joining us. Thank you also all the participants who are trickling in as we start this event. It's been an interesting 3-day conversation trying to understand how the COVID has really impacted oil and gas industry. We've had the opportunity to listen to a regulator to see how they are thinking, what they are seeing the impact to look like. We have also listened to the upstream oil and gas producers and explorers from their perspective, how the COVID situation affecting them. Yesterday, also, we were able to listen to the national oil companies, trying to gauge how differently they are also impacted by the COVID. We also thought that it would be appropriate to listen to the service companies who obviously will also be impacted differently because you don't directly sign agreements with government. You are not the ones producing the oil, but you are an important contributor to how service is delivered and how even the oil is produced ultimately. So this conversation is really for us to hear from you how the COVID has impacted your business and how you have adapted through your own strategic alignment and resilience to ensure that you still remain afloat. To help us have this conversation, I have my colleague, Pauline Anam, discussion and come back to help us wrap up what lessons we have picked up from this 3 days of conversation with the industry. So thank you once again, and let's have a fruitful engagement. Thank you. So Pauline, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Watson, for that wonderful introduction. So we'll move straight into the session, and I'll begin with introducing the panelists for today. So we have Ms. Dalila Idrisu, who is the Business Development Manager at Freebird Gas in Angola. Danila is very passionate about local content development in Africa's oil and gas industry. She has helped to expand Freebird's operations within Angola and outside Angola. And she also serves as a board member in oil and gas companies in South Africa and Mozambique. We are pleased to have you, Dalila. The next person on the list is Mr. Amar El-Hagaz. Amar El-Hagaz is the former MD or former general manager of Dynamic International Oil Services Limited, based in Sudan. He's got 14 years of experience in the oil and gas industry. He's worked in the Sudanese local market and also international markets, worked with Schlumberger and ExxonMobil, and he has expertise in business development and business management. Thank you for coming, Amma. We also have Mr. Frederick Asamoah, who is the country manager for DNVGL, and he's also the managing director for DNVGL BMS Ghana JV Limited. That's a joint venture between DNVGL and BMS. He's got 24 years of experience in the oil and gas industry. He's been involved in helping to build FPSO units in West Africa. And he's been involved as a rate coordinator for 2 FPSOs in West Africa, and currently the country manager of DNVGL. Thank you so much for coming, Mr. Fred Asamoah. And then finally, we have Mr. Karim Vladawi, Mr. Karim Vladawi is an engineer. He's got 24 years of experience working with Schlumberger. He was a field engineer, but has climbed through the ladder. Now a manager of the managing director of Egypt and East Mediterranean. He's worked with Schlumberger in Aberdeen, Egypt, in Paris, in Houston, in Moscow. He's got a wealth of experience in management, business strategy, etc. So we are pleased to have you all here. And in the order with which I mentioned your names, you proceed with your presentations. So let's have Ms. Dalila tell us about the best experience and also the experiences of service companies in Angola.
Thank you for the introduction, Pauline. I'd like to say a big thank you for ACEP for giving us this platform and opportunity to discuss our challenges and our views on the market, especially that we're sitting in so many different countries around the world at a time like this. I'd like to also say a big thank you for those who are on the front lines, ensuring that we are kept safe. So I'd just like to share a presentation with you. I hope this works. Please let me know if you can see the presentation.
Yes, it can be seen. Yes, thanks.
Thank you. So a brief overview of who Freeburg is. We are a services company headquartered in Angola. We provide a diverse array of services, which includes inspection services, sectorship, risk management, procurement, and manpower. Now, I'd like to first go into just an overview of the Angolan market. So Angola is the second largest oil producer in Africa. It's currently producing 1.1 million barrels per day as at June 2020. That dropped from 1.3 million from the beginning of the year due to the crisis. The oil and gas sector contributes about 70% to the GDP. And in Angola, there are basically 6 main operators in the industry. That's Total, Chevron, Exxon, BP, ENI, and Sonangol. And there is also one independent, that's Plus Petrol, and one Angolan company, that's Somoil. The two independents, so the Plus Petrol and Somoil, represent a very small percentage of the market. As you can see, there has been a steady decline in production, and currently there are 43 active blocks. Of these 43 active blocks, 15 are producing and 75% are offshore. In terms of just what had happened in the industry starting from 2019. So 2019, we were all very excited. The country itself had gone through a lot of reforms, a lot of changes. There was a new president after about 30 years of one president. So there was a lot of skepticism, but the markets took it on really well. So I'll just go through the main key things that happened in 2019 that, you know, the whole sector was feeling very optimistic about. One was regulatory change, the major being that Sonangol, the national oil company, restructured. So they decided that they didn't want to be the regulator, right? So they formed, the government formed an agency which is called the ANGP to regulate the industry and to be the concessionaire, to take that power away from Sonangol. So obviously this enhanced transparency, independence, and accountability. Then Sonangol decided that they wanted to sell off a lot of their non-core oil assets. So they had a lot of exposure to different types of industries, from your tourism, transport, depots, and whatnot. Then they also introduced a lot of bidding rounds, which was the first time in about 8 years. And they also introduced a marginal fuel regulation just to increase more participation, to have the industry more diverse, with more participants in the industry. The focus obviously being that they wanted to increase production, given that they'd had a steady decline. And government did, put up certain initiatives and incentives to ensure that this happens. And in 2018, 2019, there were lots of discoveries. In fact, ENI made about 5 discoveries during that time. All of this caused investor confidence. Everybody was excited. Oil prices were going up. Service companies, we were getting happier because, there was more spending coming from the operators that we hadn't seen before. And, there was a lot more stability, and, people seemed more interested in Angola. In fact, 10 rigs planned for 2020, which is like the highest that had any African country had seen at the time. However, then COVID happened, and unfortunately, all our bubbles were burst. We saw a 200,000 barrels per day decrease in production. 5 drilling rigs were suspended in March. And obviously, national budget had to change, and that caused, they had to readjust the national budget. So what did this do for the market as a whole? I think everybody felt the pinch in terms of operationally. We had to have different tactics in how we're going to operate. Our HSE planning methods had to change. All the majors had to halt a lot of their spending that they had expected. Majority of because of the nature of the industry in Angola, which is predominantly offshore, so the skills are quite highly specialized. So we saw that the manpower that we would ordinarily source from outside could not get in. So, literally a lot of things went on hold. And even ENI was strongly affected, particularly by that. So even one of our contracts with ENI had to be delayed or postponed till next year. And then in terms of the challenges that we face as a local company in the services industry, just to give a bit of background, right? So in Angola, before you are able to work in the oil and gas industry, you have to be registered with CAI, which is your business support center. And there are about 20% of the companies that are registered with CAI. Only 20 of them are local companies. And that goes to show just how much, there is a lot more room for local content participation in the country. So in terms of the challenges that we've identified, a lot of them had to do with just inherent problems in the industry in general. So just by the nature of the oil and gas activities, you'll see that it is highly technical. So those are the barriers to entry that makes it a lot harder for you to enter that market. A lot of the agreements with the oil majors are global agreements. So when it comes to local participation, that makes it slightly harder. And then in terms of the local content law itself, it has not been very clear. Although there has been this talk about Anglinization, there isn't actually an actual policy to this effect. So it makes things a lot confusing and sometimes inconsistent. One of the major risks or problems or challenges that we face is forex exchange risks. Now, in 2012, Angola imposed what they call the Anglinization of the banking sector. So all your payments, if you're considered a local company, all your payments had to go through a local bank at the local currency. Now, that was fine in 2012 when there was a lot of money in the system. However, it was badly affected after about 2014 when there was the oil crisis, and that was also compounded by the fact that there were a lot of irregularities in the banking system that caused a lot of the corresponding banks to leave. So now we're faced with Forex exposures that we're finding it very hard to mitigate that Forex exposure. So you find that you're earning in foreign currency, and you are importing majority of what you need to be able to supply your clients. So that really causes a lot of problems, especially with the volatility in the local currency, which is the Kwanza. Then another challenge that we faced was just the access to operators. Like I had said before, a lot of these contracts being global contracts, and it's just hard to just penetrate that market. And also the financial system and payment plans are not as conducive for us. And so it makes it a lot more harder to negotiate with for financial instruments. All of this was exacerbated and compounded with the COVID issues. I won't go into the just the working conditions, because I think that was, very well explained in the previous sessions. But in terms of what is particular to us, what we are seeing a lot more now is clients are renegotiating contracts and payment terms. And in Angola, that's a lot harder for us because you are limited to a small number of clients, and they are, so to speak, the big boys. So it's a lot harder for you to have bargaining power to be able to negotiate, quote unquote, fairly, right? So that, puts us in a dilemma. You don't want to, play hardball and not be used as a supplier, and you also don't want to pinch yourself financially. So we're seeing a lot of that. We're being stretched, and also it's just harder to access banking instruments because some of the deals are too small to be covered by a lot of the banks, so it's not as appetizing to the banks. And also just the level of forex exposure risk is so high that a lot of the banks are not willing to take that on. There's also been a lot of local companies have faced challenges with diversification of their income sources. So you'll find that a lot of companies, were relying on certain contracts, which has now since been canceled. So a lot of companies have gone under and have had to close shop. A lot of companies were also unprepared. They didn't have proper emergency response plans to be able to keep up with, this epidemic and the high demands of HSE requirements from the clients. So that was difficult for a lot of us in the sector. A lot of us did not have the requisite cash flow to be able to give us that cushion to get through this time. And operational issues like internet connectivity for people that were working from home. So during this time, Angola was really strict with the lockdown, and what they immediately did, because they understand how important the oil and gas sector is, they immediately gave what they called special services permits to companies in the oil and gas sectors, which will allow us for easy movements and also to allow us to gain access to our client sites and whatnot. So we had to really ramp up pretty quickly in ensuring that, our staff was trained properly, and we had the requisite tracing modalities in place, temperature tests, et cetera, et cetera. In terms of how FreeBurge itself has been coping with all these challenges, and specifically in terms of the COVID, we've just made sure always that we had our HSE compliance standards kept to the highest levels. And that came by default because, in order to be pre-qualified with the IOCs, you had to have very strong HSE plans, policies, even certifications. So that also always had to be updated. So in terms of that, we already had a machine that we could use. So that went immediately, we kickstarted that off. We have a COVID response team because we have about 75 technicians that are throughout the country in the different regions. So we really needed to make sure, we've always needed to make sure that those high-risk employees understand the HSE policies and frameworks. So that is something that we've always done. So that wasn't difficult for us to disseminate information and just make sure that our people are as prepared as possible. Then also, what benefited us is our diversification in terms of our income sources, the business offerings, and the getting new clients, new suppliers, and that has helped us to manage our exposures to maybe just one company or our exposures to just one supplier, and that has been a strategy that actually it's benefited us now because we undertook that about 2 years ago when we only had maybe 2 clients that we were servicing, and we realized that was risky. Then what we've also been doing is contract renegotiation. So going to our clients, initiating that first contact to say, we want to renegotiate terms, make sure that the terms are as favorable to both parties as much as possible. We've also found ways, or we've been trying to find ways to mitigate risks. So there are ways to mitigate the risks. It's just, you just need to make sure that you have a strong legal team to justify why, you would need certain portions of maybe your invoicing to be in foreign currency for you to be able to mitigate those risk exposures that you have for costs. And then we've also been opportunistic. So we've had a lot of, or we've been trying to identify a lot of stranded assets by various companies in the industry who felt that they didn't have, or they needed the liquidity right now. And so that's what we've bought a couple of assets that, came at a very good price, and we felt that it's a good time, to take the risk, buy it, because we're looking long term and that asset will come into hand. We also took advantage of a lot of the staff that were getting redundant. We, employed some of them as consultants, temporary consultants in cases like that. We've also been very open to collaborations with even some very well-known, reputable EPC companies that had some, portion of the business that they didn't feel from an economic perspective in terms of their overheads didn't make sense for them. So we've been able to come to some sort of agreements in that regard. So what we've learned is just to ensure that we are as flexible as possible in terms of how we reposition ourselves for any condition. I guess also maybe we are also lucky in the sense that we also have a lot of downstream exposure in terms of the services. So that helped us a lot, because what we've been seeing is a lot of storage, right? So lack of storage rather. So we've been able to now ramp up our ship-to-ship business or our marine business in terms of providing some downstream clients, which would ordinarily not even provide them with services, because just the location of where Angola is on the map has made some opportunistic plays for traders in the market to be able to do some offshore STS operations over there. So I think going forward, in terms of lessons to be learned, or maybe in terms of where we feel government needs to maybe play a better role, we feel like instead of being reactionary, which is what we're seeing now in Angola, is being more proactive. So we just feel like we haven't had a lot of assistance that we could have had from government in this regard, and especially being deliberate about trying to ensure that, you know, there is local content being enforced and being monitored. We just don't feel that there is enough of that. It just seems that everybody has just been caught off guard. Yes, that's understandable, but that doesn't mean that we can't still plan for the future. We just hope for the best. So I think that's it from my side. Thank you very much, Pauline.
Thank you so much, Dalila. You've given us an interesting overview of the oil and gas sector and local content in Angola. And it's interesting to know that with Angola being the second largest producer in Africa, local content is still underdeveloped from the presentation that you made. I have a couple of questions for you. But before that, I also like to alert our participants to post their questions. You have the opportunity to post your questions to the panelists, so please do so while we progress. So Dalila, you mentioned that much of the inputs to the industry are imported. I would like to know how much of that, how much inputs do you import, does Freebird import, and how has COVID-19 impacted on the import of your inputs? You also mentioned about how the government has failed to support local companies in terms of developing local content. And I can imagine that it is very challenging for Freebird and local companies currently. So, but I would like you to throw more light on particularly the contract negotiation. First of all, have the companies declared force majeure as a result of COVID-19? Are there contracts being cancelled in Angola between oil and gas companies and service companies? And how has the government supported in all of this? Is there any way government has supported?
Okay, so to your first question about how much do we import? So all our assets, majority of our assets we import, and then maybe we do some fabrication in country, or the inspections can be done in country. But in terms of the assets itself that we use, we definitely import. In terms of our procurement business, we definitely, I would say, import about 80% of that we import to supply our clients. And in terms of the contract negotiation you mentioned, so what they say in the contract is they will award you a contract, but you only deliver or you only perform on call-offs. So if they don't send you a call-off, you're not going to service the contract and you're not going to get paid. So, it's, you can say, oh, I have this number of contracts with XYZ, IOC. But if you're not getting any call-offs, and that's said from the start in the tender. So that's one thing. And then in terms of contract negotiation, you see that a lot of the contracts will tell you that the price is fixed for the duration of the contract, unless there is a material change in, maybe they usually mention Forex, but obviously nobody would ever know of COVID, right? So, however, even though they say that the supplier cannot negotiate, what we found that is there's nothing wrong with asking. So we've definitely been able to go to our clients and just try to understand what it is that we could possibly renegotiate in the contract. So maybe if we agree to decrease our price, but they imply that they would increase the volume, because sometimes they have a number of suppliers that they can source these services and products from. So you always just want to make sure you're relevant, because sometimes they even forget about you. So we always just make sure we're maintaining that relationship with the clients. And then the last thing you mentioned, I didn't get it. There were 3 questions.
So I mentioned support from government in terms of contract renegotiation.
I would say no support at all from government. I think the thing is, Angola is peculiar because over the last 5 years, there's been so much change in the government that their priorities have not really been local content. So they spent a lot of time really restructuring the position of what Sonangol would be. So there was a lot of time and effort and money spent just trying to restructure that they have a business support center, right? But it's like as if, you know, their efforts, they didn't put as much effort into that. So that's how we felt that if we didn't take the initiative, we didn't say, okay, we're going to hire like advisory lawyers to be able to help us, assist us in terms of negotiating some of these contracts, maybe we wouldn't have gotten, you know, where we are right now, you know, where some companies literally have had to close down because of the Forex exposure. They literally have too many kwanzas and they just don't know how to buy dollars to be able to get the products.
Thank you so much, Dalila. To move on, we would ask Mr. Amar to tell us the Sudan experience.
Sorry, let me, is my voice is clear, no?
Yes, please, yeah.
Okay, all right. So first of all, I will start with a small disclaimer. I used to be the general manager for Dynamic Oilfield Services, which is the company I'm presenting today. However, as of a few days back, I have been appointed as a general director for business development with the Ministry of Energy and Mining, Government of Sudan. So I'm only wearing the hat of my previous employer in this presentation. This is just a disclaimer to have the privilege not to be liable with anything related with the government. So in brief, Dynamic Oilfield Services, International Oilfield Services, it's a company established back in 2006. They started to operate in 2007. It has been a company jointly made by a group of experts and an investor from Sudan. Hajjah Group is one of the known investors in Sudan, working in different sectors. One of them is the energy, and they established Dynamic Oilfield Services. Since then, they have been growing. It's a company where they have a very good size of the market share today from the services market. They're providing different services, well services, wireline, cementing, different upstream services. Everyone knows about it. So from that end, I will move on to the next part, which I will be talking briefly about the point which have been asked to talk about, the reality of the challenges, the implications in the future, the company strategies to mitigate, and the lesson learned. So first of all, about the realities of the challenges, I'll talk about it in 3 aspects: from our people aspect, as a company, our customer, and our business. So for the people, there's 2 main things: the health and safety risk, which we have, everyone knows it with the Covid-19. This was a huge risk, very new to the world. We have a very little knowledge on how to deal with, but the mitigation is straightforward. Most of it is to keep everyone away and keep them safe. And we have to have a mitigation plan to deal with the risk whenever it happens. There's some social risk, keeping the people in the field away from their families for extended periods This also has imposed some risk. Some of it is actual risk, which has to have some mitigation to avoid major issues. The other part is the customer part. The lack of deliver the customer need on time. Always most of the time the service provider, their single quality they always keep is to be able to deliver the customer expectation on time. And with the existing difficulties, this has become a very challenging situation. Most of the time, the service provider have some services provided by the client, the logistic common services, the travel to the field, the hospitals in the field, these kind of general services. And with the existing, there's more pressure on the client side providing those services to different companies. So this has also become a little bit challenging situation, managing the relation between the service providers and the operators. Also, the quality of the work and the potentiality of QHSE risk, as I mentioned before, and whatever implications in terms of losses, potential losses in terms of quality or health or safety, or even perspective, which is the business. The drop of revenue is number one issue. We have faced a significant drop of revenue versus forecasted revenue, to maybe 30% of what we have forecasted for, and this was a very significant drop in revenue, directly proportional with the drop in activities for the client. As the previous speaker mentioned, most of the contract is set up in a call-out basis. So there is no guarantee of the revenue unless the client does this. The other part is the higher cost of the operation due to the longer extended period of time for logistics, the seaport issues. There's lots of implications related to the logistics, as well as the overhead cost, the extra overhead cost for the overtime or whatever extra bonuses you have to pay for to compensate for the overstay of the staff. The fourth part, the cash flow. There's a huge cash flow losses due to forex issues, due to sometimes it's a mechanical issue. Client not being able to pay you, not because they don't have the money or they don't want to pay you, simply the banks are not functioning the way they used to function. Some of it is international transfer, some of it is local transfer. So this has imposed a serious cash flow issues as well. So this is all about the reality of the issues from three different aspects. The implication of the identified challenges on the promotion of the local content. I'm very happy of this forum, and I'm really thank you, Africa Center of Energy, for giving us the opportunity to get together and speak about this topic. And this actually a new era where we have to sit down and think collectively. First of all, individually as different companies in the larger scale as country levels, as the continent, as African, and global wise. So in this aspect in particular, I will be talking about different levels, the macro level and the macro level. And this forum being the African forum, definitely we have to think collectively as African country. So from the experience we had in Dynamic, the reason we have initiated Dynamic, that time back in 2016, due to political issues in Sudan, some of the companies, they had to pull out of Sudan, the multinational companies who used to provide those services. They had to pull out from Sudan due to US sanctions on Sudan, purely political issues. This has made some gaps in the market, which is an opportunity for the local company to start. And this is where we have started. Now there is more or less the same situation for different reasons. There's also kind of sanction, not political one. This time is health related issue, which is the pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic. And strategically, we have to keep thinking about the same situation especially that we're in Africa. We had before some sort of pandemic, not in the severity of the COVID-19, but in the Ebola, which has not been qualified as pandemic. However, it was a very serious one for Africa continents. And we expect to be realistic that in Africa, there's a higher risk for having this situation moving forward. So thinking within this perspective, thinking through the risk and the mitigation within the Africa content is very important. So on the macro level, the localization is something we have to take away from this experience for sure. This comes always, the argument when we talk about the localization, the argument will become the scalability. So we will not be able to scale up the business if we have a localized kind of market. However, I would love to see this challenge always from two different perspectives, the supply side and the demand side. Most of the people, when they talk about the inability of scaling a localized business, they're talking about the supply side. But when we talk about the demand side, being in Africa, I think we are very demanding in terms of services, in terms of market, in terms of whatever resources. So the African content itself is full of resources, and it's demanding lots of investment, lots of effort, lots of work. And we can, if we collectively thought through, we can package and propose ourselves in a very good market proposition where we can create the scalability driven by the demand, not the supply. So the scalability argument about the localization is something we have to look at it differently when we see the African content. And I think this is very relevant to this forum. And we always have to have such forum to think from the African point of view, how we can scale up the business on a localized point of view, and how we can take the benefit of the resources we have in, and how we can share the resources and avoid a situation where we can have their view within the country, within the continent, where we'll be very limited on getting support outside the continent or the country the same way we used to get. The issue related to the scalability approach is the very fragmented kind of economy in the continent. And the solution is easy. We have to unify our proposition in a way or the other. And I think this has to be some sort of strategic takeaway from this forum or from this pandemic, is how we can unify our market proposition in Africa from the energy side or even other markets or any other commodity. But definitely this is something we have to focus on, and we see how we can tackle it. From the micro level, we have the job security kind of issues related to the local, providing job opportunity for the local people in different countries within Africa and for the different countries within Africa. And definitely from this pandemic, there is an opportunity of increasing the demand of the local content and the employment of the local employees. Because as such, you will have more reliance on the international supply chain and movement between continents for people. And as I said, we have to put in mind that this, the pandemic, it can happen, and Africa has more potential for these kind of things other than the other continent in the world. The logistic and supply chain also improving the intra kind of logistic supply chain within Africa. Integrating the way we are doing the logistic within Africa, sourcing out things from country to country instead of sourcing everything from outside the continent to inside the continent is something we need to think of, and definitely will reduce the risk of these kind of care views. Moving on to the third points, the strategies, or I would love to say it's actually an action. There's no strategies as such to react, but there is lots of action has been implemented in our case, in our company, in Dynamic, to react to the pandemic. First of all, we have divided the plan for short-term and long-term. The main point about the short-term is the KHSC to provide business continuity. I'm sure most of the people, they have talked about their measures, and ours are no different than most of the measures. Social distancing, providing different materials for the people to be able to keep the hygiene and to keep the sanity of everyone working in the field and in the offices. Lots of measures all falling under the headline of KHSE measures and business continuity plan. The second point related to the short-term plan is the communication with the client to align our plan with the client plans. We see that the more we align, they're facing the same challenges. So keeping the communication and the level of the alignments will help both of us making a win-win kind of situation, a more collaborative way of troubleshooting for the issues. And I think in Sudan, we had a good experience about that. We had, this was from the government side. They had an initiative making an ECC, emergency center, within the government, within the Ministry of Energy, to support all the companies working in the energy or in the oil and gas sectors, being oil operator or service provider or whatever, even governmental agencies or whatever. So this central office has helped a lot, easing down the different situation, aligning the plan, understanding the different challenges, and trying to put solution fitting everyone together and avoiding every type of conflict between the different plans. So I think this is a very good experience we had in Sudan, and I would love to see it more elaborated about in the future, and we can have more communication about it. Thank you for the people they're handling this ECC for now. The third part in the short-term plan is cost optimization, which is the common phrase most of the people they use. There are lots of cost optimization kind of plans we have followed. Revision for our fixed cost component, where we have some rented kind of assets. We had planned to reduce those kind of assets. Lots of cost optimization plans. This is very common. I'm sure lots of people they have talked about, but this is one of our main pillars in our short-term plan. The other part was, and this was very painful part, is the revision of our HR cost and the handling of the employees. Again, the same strategy we have followed with our customers, we followed with our employees, trying to keep the communication with the employees to the maximum level, setting the expectation correctly. The situation is not pleasant to anyone. So being so realistic, being so open, transparent with our customer as well as our employees. And we have not done it in our company, but I've heard that other companies, they have even extended their reach to the families of their employees, and I'm really pleased to hear that the result was brilliant about this experience, reaching out to the families of the employees and seeing their needs and trying to help on that. And at least calming the situation. This has also helped improving the morale of the families as well as the employees. Also communicating with the government agencies, tax authority, and different government agencies. And I would say something very positive about not being part of the government now, but this actually was a good initiative from the government that time. They have built an exercise where they can postpone also the tax payment, due payment for the companies where they have affected by the pandemic. So this has helped reducing the pressure on the cash flow on the companies. And this was received very well by the different investment community in the country, from the service provider to the operators and everyone, seeing the government is actually reacting and trying to help. Also, we have tried to, as a second, the last point in our short-term plan was communicating with the bank and different institutions to help in the cash flow situation, either by leasing some more money or postponing some due payments. And this also has worked out in some cases. So this is also a situation. And we are no different from the Angolan experience, that we have a very severe forex risk issue in Sudan. Something has been around for some time and has a huge impact on the business. And more we see an urgent need of putting a solution for that. And I hope this pandemic has shown how severe the dealing with different forex risk issue can have a huge impact on the business. This is all about the short-term plans dealing with the pandemic. For the long-term issue, mainly we have 2 points. The first one, to recover whatever business we have lost. And we don't think that we can recover in the short-term plan. However, on the longer-term plan, we have some hopes. We have some plans based on the improvement of the situation of the current existing care view and issues. And we have a longer-term plan to recover on the longer-term, whatever we have lost in this shorter period of time. We have planned even to restructure our existing capital and distribution of the capital requirement, the capex, the opex, and everything in a way that it can match the new cash flow situation in a more realistic way. Also, the second point in the long-term plan is to diversify the business, both in the term of the existing business, how we can provide the existing business in different ways. Digitalization, remote kind of operations, remote kind of communication, the same way we have doing this conference now. Instead of sitting in huge halls, we're doing everything now on Zoom and different social media platforms, which is a new way of doing business. So this type of diversification and new way of doing business is something we are trying to adopt and see on longer term how we can sustain this type of business. The other part also is the diversification in doing new businesses, how we can have the opportunity, the existing situation, and think of new type of opportunity, how we can run operation remotely, how we can have new work where the client can reduce the risk of such situation like we are in now by providing the service in a different way. So this is briefly the, yes.
Yeah, great. So we thank you so much for giving us details about the experience in Sudan, speaking about, the health and safety challenges, delivery challenges, the revenue losses, which is as a result of limited diversification. So I'm happy that you've spoken about diversification as a new strategy for the company, and also about cash flow losses. I'm sorry to have interrupted in the way I did, and we really appreciate the effort you put in all of this, which is great. I have a question for you. You made a point about scalability from the macro level and looking at the both demand and supply side. And you mentioned how it is important for African countries or companies operating in Africa to, support one another with inputs produced in Africa. So the question I have for you is, what are the challenges you foresee with this kind of arrangement, particularly looking at trade limitations, tariff regimes, and also considering that other African countries also have local content policies that they want to adhere to? So please,
Yeah, I mean, for example, if I want to source out any type of material, I'm here in Sudan. If I want to source out a material from my neighboring country, Egypt, Chad, or South Sudan, if I want to import or export something, this would be much more difficult than importing or exporting anything from China. This is a very strange situation, something we have to work out to ease it down. This is nothing against globalization. I think we have to be very careful putting this in a way that this would be a win-win situation, even with the global kind of macroeconomics. It's not just for the countries. We're not taking away the business from the super economies. What we are trying to do, we are trying to do to be more collaborative with the different kind of economies in the world, in a way that we can have an existing win-win situation instead of the lose-lose situation we're in now, where we cannot import anything from the world, they cannot export anything, and we left alone doing nothing. So this is what I meant by trying to ease down the type of collaboration between the countries when geographically you can connect the countries. From a legislative point of view, you have to do it in a way or the other. So this is what I meant by the African content kind of scalability.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And we would move on to DMVGL, Mr. Frederick Asamoah. Yeah. Can you please unmute?
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes, please. We can hear you now. Yeah. Please proceed.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Pauline. Thank you very much for giving us this opportunity to discuss the impact of this COVID-19 on our service deliveries, and then the strategic mitigation measures we have put in place, and also to see some lessons we can share with especially the indigenous Ghanaian companies or indigenous African companies for that matter. And before I go on, I just want to give a brief description of DMV, the services we do, and then look at how this has affected our services. DMVGL is an independent expert risk management and quality assurance company operating in more than 100 countries. Through its broad experience and deep expertise, DMVGL advances safety and sustainable performance, set industrial benchmarks, and inspires and invents solutions. Whether accessing a new ship design, optimizing the performance of a wind farm, analyzing sensor data from a gas pipeline, or certifying a food company's supply chain, DMVGL enables its customers and their stakeholders to make a critical decision with confidence. Driven by its purpose to safeguard life, property, and environment, DMVGL also helps tackle the challenges and the global transformation facing its customers and the world together, and is a trusted voice for many of the world's most successful and forward-thinking companies globally. We largely operate in 5 business areas: the maritime, oil and gas, energy, business assurance, and then digital solutions. For the purposes of this discussion, I'll just limit our services areas that are in Ghana, and I'll look at it from this perspective: the COVID impact on these services, business sustainability and business continuity, and then lessons learned for opportunities for the indigenous Ghanaian companies. When this COVID set in, of course, the services DMV was rendering in the upstream can be divided mainly into 2 parts. We have our own maritime that takes care of ships, ships in general, from Togo all the way up to Mauritania. And then we have the oil and gas sector, which we have a joint venture with Ben Marine Services. That also provides technical advisory and technical assurances in the upstream industry. So prior to the COVID-19 impact, we actually in talks with ACEP and Talo in developing their ITC, independent technical consultancy services. Usually before a field is developed, you need an independent consultant to tell you whether the project is bankable before the financial institutions comes in. So this was a very large project for us. And then we're hoping that if this project had come on, of course, would have been a huge knowledge transfer through our JV partner, because this is something we've never done. The conventional DMV in Ghana had always concentrated mainly in the shipping industry. But with the onset of oil discovery in Africa, in Ghana, we wanted to bring in this expertise. But you can imagine with ACA's announcement early, was it after the COVID, that this project has been suspended. It means that all this has been shuttered now. Also coupled with the restricted travel restrictions as a result of COVID-19 would also mean that our coverage within West Africa is limited only to Ghana. So that means that if there are vessels coming to Ghana from the maritime side, and of course, some of the vessels are also supporting the upstream activities. So it would mean that unless the vessels are within Ghana, cash flow or revenue has also been disrupted. This has actually resulted in the postponement of most of the services that we really have to do. So what are the strategies we put in place? The first thing, DMV, our top priority was about the people, the health and safety of our employees, our customers, and then the communities we work in. So as a result of this, what we did first was to set up a local crisis management team that meets weekly to discuss mainly about our own health and then safety related to the ongoing services that we are rendering. And then every 2 weeks, we have the regional crisis meeting where individual managers would share their experience on how they are coping with the crisis. The strategies we put in place is that we decided, in order not to protect ourselves and also not to infect others if we get infected, was to work from home. So as soon as this lockdown came in, we decided to work from home. So from that time, March up to now, our office is still closed down. We're not working in the office. And the second thing was that our financial model was largely based on chargeability. And those of you know chargeability is comparing revenue with utilization index of your people. So if revenue shorts and people are not working, then it means your chargeability is not even matching with your revenue. So how do we do it? There are two ways. For our businesses where the contracts were canceled completely, there's nothing we can do to the staff. But instead of laying them off completely, that is, it's largely affected our JV entity. What we did was that we shifted the goalpost from permanent employees sitting in the office, which is closed down, or sitting at home practically doing nothing. We give them a subcontract, that is the arrangement, a proposal to have a subcontract, so they could still have alliance with the company, they could join our meetings and still encourage them. Anytime there is a job here and there, then we're able to call them up to do it. The second thing we did also was that for those who are in the maritime, where there are still ships calling up in the ports and also providing services for the offshore units. Currently, we have 3 FPSOs in Ghana. 2 of them are classed by DNV. So it means that we still have to continue providing services for them. So we need to maintain these guys to do that. But the chargeability was still very low. So what we did first was that we had a compulsory leave where you have to take part of your annual leave. By doing so, it means that you hold up your chargeability, it doesn't drop. It means that you are, whatever level you are, is what we maintain in. And then the second thing was that we look at voluntary salary reduction and then reducing the number of hours you also work. This was done voluntary. If you don't want it, it's fine. So it was not compulsory. The idea was to try to see how best we can sustain ourselves, because the principle of survival, if you cannot survive, there's no point in trying to help others. We can't even sustain our businesses for other, most of our clients. And then the third was that some of our clients also came in for negotiation of salaries, negotiation of contract fees. So this also drives down our revenue. So this is where we are now. And then what are the strategies we put in place to ensure business continuity? As a result of this, prior to this COVID-19, DMV believed that the future actually belongs to those who can hear it coming. So way back in 2013, we actually implemented something we called through our digital solutions, something we called remote service, where we are able to carry out the surveys that we do remotely. One of our services under classification is to carry out periodical surveys and ensure that the vessel is still in compliance with statutory laws and then classification requirements. And in so doing, we endorse their certificate, based on which the stakeholders, the banks, the charterers, and all the stakeholders would have confidence in your operation. So we need business continuity in that direction. So what we did was 2013, we did this remote service. We didn't know this was coming, but it has really helped us. From the time we implemented remote service in 2018 up to date, we have done about 16,000 worldwide remote service, which means that this COVID, if we have not put this in place, would have really affected us. Imagine one of the offshore units was affected, COVID affected some of the guys, so they have to bring all of them back home. And then the certificate is due for survey. If you don't do it, certificate will overdue, insurances may withdraw their services, banks may come up there. That is how important the certificate we issued it. With COVID, with this remote survey in place, I managed to carry out an annual survey here, combination of document review, function tests, and inspections. Some of them, there were some limitations, but it provided some way of providing business continuity for our client. The advantages of this was that it provided a minimal disruption to operations. There was no waiting time, there was no travel-related expenses, logistics, and even bed space on board where a surveyor could sleep were all minimized. This also ensured business continuity, as I've said. And then it's also avoid owners postponing the service, which may result to overdue surveys and other operational activities. The second thing we did also was that in addition to this, we have also digitalized our reports and then certificates. So I don't necessarily have to go on board to issue a certificate once a survey or an inspection has been carried out. So with sitting at home, you can do the reporting. When you finish, then you publish it. So it goes online. And then the certificates too are digitalized. That means that we don't even need to sign it. It's electronically signed and issue electronic identification number. I think we use blockchain technology in verifying the authenticity of the certificate. So this initiative is applicable to our offshore periodical services, our oil and gas advisory services, and then the ISO certification. If you are carrying out any ISO certification, previously we have to come to your office, look at the area, and then engage the people, physically, face to face, but we can do remote auditing as well. So we have to innovate something to make sure that there's a business continuity support for our clients. So basically, this is how we have been able to manage the crisis. I don't want to talk much, but the lessons we have learned is that I want to share with the Ghanaian indigenous companies, as well as if we want African indigenous companies, is that they should look forward to investing in digitalization, that is IT infrastructure, in their work processes. And also they need to train in certain specific engineering service areas. We realize that some of the services we do in Ghana as a classification society, we need the owners, for example, to demonstrate that certain specific equipment had been serviced, by a third party, which have been certified either by us or by a relevant authority. Most of these service providers are all outside the country. So with this COVID, they couldn't travel down. So some of the services, especially the service I did, it means we have to either postpone those services until restrictions are lifted. So it's also a business opportunity for the indigenous Ghanaians who provide services in the upstream, especially the technical services, to get themselves certified. I think last year I raised this with Petroleum Commission, and then they are looking at it. But more importantly, some people have taken the lead. We've got Aquatech as a diving company. We've got Boss Engineering also providing services in the LSA, but there are still other specific services we believe that there are still opportunities for Ghanaians to work on. And also for production of spare parts, I know spare parts could be thrown in by DHL and all these international couriers, but it's also a window of opportunity for us to look at the 3D printers, how best some of these consumable items, spare parts could be produced locally, And then secondly, but not the last, also to see how best they can diversify their investment. As the old age saying goes that don't put all your eggs in one basket. DMV has, for example, 5 business areas: maritime, oil and gas, business assurance, digital, and then energy. So you could also look at this model and see how best you could, invest in other business areas, so that if we have this pandemic and it's affecting oil and gas so much, you'll be able to turn out to other ones so that it doesn't affect your cash inflow. So basically, this is all that I have to say. If there are any questions, then I could pick them up. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Asamoah. We are really grateful for the detailed presentation you've done. We are really inspired by DMVGL's efforts in various ways. So from what you have said, diversification is very important. Thinking ahead of time is also very important. Right now, COVID-19 has already happened. Companies are already impacted. We should be thinking more about the future than counting the losses. We thank you so much for giving us some pointers to Ghanaian indigenous companies and also companies in Africa. Now, there is a question I have for you. The question is, did the government of Ghana provide any form of relief to companies in the oil and gas sector, especially indigenous Ghanaian companies? You know, the government of Ghana has been providing support to other areas, but what about the indigenous companies, especially because there is a link between the oil and gas sector and our diversification agenda as a country? What effort has the government of Ghana made? The other thing I want you to clarify for us is this. So when we look at DMVGL, it's a very large company. You've done a lot of work, you know, across the world. You are huge. So and you've been in existence for long. So it is easy to adapt to some of these things, especially with all the systems you've put in place over time. You have made suggestions to indigenous Ghanaian companies and indigenous African companies in the oil and gas industry. How can they practically put these things in place, especially in this difficult time? Acting now is very important, but how practical is that? Are they able to do that?
Okay, so the first question has to do with how is Ghana, the Ghana government supporting the oil and gas. Fortunately, I don't work for the government, but I think that maybe we can emulate what others have done. I heard, was it Sudan or Kenya, where they said they've got some relief from the government. So I think that the indigenous Ghanaian companies have an association. They could use that association to approach a petroleum commission. And there was 1% fund that was set aside. I don't know if there is any PC person here could probably advise that. I think these guys need relief. The form of relief, I don't know. But if the relief could be channeled into providing services that are relevant now, then there could be a win-win situation because the relief will retrain them, realign them within the oil and gas sector to take up other services that otherwise the experts were doing. And that is where I could see. But other countries, yes, even in Norway, I understand that there has been some relief to other oil and gas companies. So I believe that the government will also give heed to this. The other one is that what immediate steps can we do to help the indigenous companies within Ghana and across Africa? I've already stated that the first thing is that they need to re-strategize and see how best they can digitalize some of their. It depends on the type of service you are delivering. But if you are delivering technical services and you have to go every time to work there, then you can, even before you put in structures like DMV, improvise. For example, there was a time I'm doing a survey for a vessel, and then we have a platform for live streaming. The live streaming went off. What I did with the guy is that, do you have a phone? Are you connected to internet? He said, yes. Okay, call me on WhatsApp. And then just touch the screen. There is a camera there. Tap the camera. It would activate the back camera, the back camera lens, so that you could see exactly what you are showing me. So by that, we're able to do live without using any of our even conventional method. So you could start improvising ways and means of doing some of these things. And if you don't innovate, you will die. Innovation, there's no excuse, whether there's COVID or no COVID. Even when COVID leaves us, life will not be the same way, I think. So investing in this is a key factor. And I think that PC can also take the lead. Let's identify certain critical areas we think we could help the indigenous companies. I was even proposing that we should have a format for quality management system, which describe the work processes of all indigenous companies. You know, we have different indigenous category of services. So if you are in the fabrication services, we have a template on how your quality management system should look like. And if you are in the service deliveries, you should also have a quality a template, you know, that looks almost the same for all. And then if you are in the exploration and indigenous, also you have a similar one. So by doing that, we have a common platform for all of them. They don't need to invest so much in developing this ISO certification, because if you have a good ISO certification in place, there's an area for IT application, and that then you'll be able to improve your work processes within that area. So if we can nationalize this, or in the continents in between petroleum commissions across Africa, they can look at this area to see how best. Some of them are struggling. They bid for contract, they will tell them they don't have ISO certification, and then they back. Thankfully enough, COVID or no COVID, this can be done remotely by DNV. But we have to look at how best we can, streamline this. Just have a template. If you are delivering, you are doing welding, you are doing fabrication, this is the ISO certification that PC has approved. So you just get a template and then put in the necessary inputs and get it certified. That is what I could say. Hello?
Hi. Yeah, thank you so much, Fred. Thank you so much for answering the question. So we'll move on to the presentation by Karim Badawi. Mr. Karim Badawi, please.
Yes, hello, good morning and good afternoon, everyone. Just a confirmation, you can hear me well?
Yes.
Very good. So first of all, I'm very proud and very happy to join such an important forum and to be speaking with such a distinguished panelists have spoken before me. So it's a great pleasure to be here. So I've joined Schlumberger over 23 years ago now. Schlumberger is the biggest oilfield service company in the world. We together create amazing technology to unlock access to energy for the benefit of all. And we really kind of are collectively really working to drive high performance sustainably. And when we look at the oil and gas sector, and today we are gathered in the periphery because of COVID-19. But I would say that we all have to, remind ourselves that the oil and gas sector and the energy sector is a very resilient sector. And this is why there is, yes, unprecedented times today. But at the same time, I am very confident that we will all come out, much stronger than before, and we will continue to strive, for the future, for the benefit of all. The oil and gas sector and the energy sector, will always be, critically needed, for the general development for, for the population and the people's need, around the world. And now, looking at COVID-19, like some of my colleagues, mentioned, really is not something that anyone saw coming. However, I do believe that our HAC teams have done an amazing, collective work to really make sure that we do all that can be done to put in place, preventative measures, risk mitigation measures of how we can minimize the spread, of the virus, but also in terms on how to respond effectively as one to look after, all our people and our stakeholders, around the world. And with that, I would also like to mention, something which has also been echoed by, many of the panelists who talked today. For COVID-19, there is no international company, local company, specific, governments or private, private sector. We're all in this together. Everyone is in this together. And this is why, I feel also very proud to also be able to share with everybody on the, on the panel, today, and it exists also on our website, on our corporate website, www.slb.com. You will find also material with very clear guidelines and standards specific for COVID-19 that the company has put together, based on the best practices and the knowledge of all the recognized, institutions around the world of how we can keep our people safe in the various environments where we do operate. So both in our facilities, in our offices, but also in the front line. And these documents, are available with, guidance, posters, also emergency response, type of plans that, again, you are most welcome to look into and complement whatever, let's say, already existing, plans and documents that you may have, because we're all in this together. And we also have to remember that we're not really done yet with COVID-19. I mean, COVID-19 is still here in many parts of the world, and we really have to continue working together to protect, our people, families and loved ones, and and everyone, all the stakeholders that we interact, with. And I will take maybe just a very brief moment also to maybe remind really, all of us on the very basic principles of making sure that we always wash our hands as frequently as possible, that the social distancing measures are really kept both, where in let's say in the business context, or as well on the personal front, because a lot of the cases also that are seen around the world are not necessarily due to, let's say, spread, at work, but actually due to, community spread and due to social interactions. And last but not least, which is very important, is the wearing of the masks. I mean, the wearing of the masks, is something which is very important, because it really kind of help prevent the spread of the virus, because you can have many asymptomatic, cases who do not have any symptoms, and hence wearing the mask prevent the spread of the virus to others. Or if others around you have the, the virus, is to protect yourself, from the virus. So I think on the COVID-19, I will really reiterate that we are still in it. We still have to keep a very high degree of focus, and we are very happy as a company to be sharing, our best practices, with the rest of the, of our colleagues and stakeholders in the sector, and also outside the sector, because we're all in one. And also linked to the COVID-19, HSE is very, very important in the oil and gas sector. And, Schlumberger, keeps HSE as really our #1 priority to keep our people, and all our stakeholders safe. And this is why, I would like to maybe also reiterate that in the current environment that we're in, and with a lot of the mindset, fostered and communication around COVID-19, around, the challenges as a result of the oil prices, from a business perspective, it is very important that we all remind ourselves to keep a very, very strong focus on injury prevention, and also in terms on driving safety. Because again, like also my colleague, Dalila also mentioned, we have, brave, men and women, operating in the front line, keeping really the sector alive and providing, energy needs, for the world. And it's very important that we keep a very high degree of focus on their safety, and how we can make sure that also their state of mind is focused, that they feel that we are empowering them to stop the job if they feel it is unsafe to do so, and also to work together to have risk mitigation measures, before they proceed, to keep themselves and the various stakeholders safe. Driving is also one of the biggest, exposure, in the sector. And again, whether driving done, through, our, let's say, own individual companies, but also through, third parties in terms of shipment of goods, right, from different places and so forth. And this is why also driving safety is something that we all have to really work together to keep on improving. And again, I feel very proud that Schlumberger is putting also driving safety very high, on its priority, and also in terms of leveraging digital capabilities and digital tools to really kind of help improve the driving efficiency, the driving performance, and the driving, experience, to ensure a safe, a safe driving process around the world. The other element which I also wanted to talk about is also on the digitalization. And again, I look at let's say the COVID-19, the low oil price environment that we're in, as a way to actually look at the positive outcome And that positive outcome is really an acceleration of the digitalization in the sector and in many other sectors. Today, we all are going through an accelerated embracing technology much quicker than before, because we have all been faced with situations whereby, due to limitation of travel, due to limitation, from exposure on the safety front, due to the let's say the inability and the need to connect with our people, to essentially leverage the digital enablement, number one, to engage with our people and keep focus on HAC, and hence holding virtual HAC field visits, virtually holding virtual roundtables with our employees to keep them engaged, motivated, and also up to date with the latest developments ongoing within the sector, within the company, and keeping that connection. And the other element is also the digital, embracement of the digital enablement in terms of doing things in a more effective and efficient way. Such, again, as my colleague, and the friend, Ammar, mentioned about remote operation, for example, remote operation in terms of minimizing, footprint of, people at the well site, or providing enablement, with experts from all around the world, to be able to bring in that know-how, on the ground. So is also a way whereby maybe in the past was taken, let's say, differently in different parts of the world in terms of adoption of remote operations. However, now we will see a much more accelerated adoption of remote operations, around the world. The other element is also enabling digital enablement in terms of efficiency, increasing efficiency. If you look today in terms of the challenges of low oil prices and so forth, we have to find as an industry ways to reduce the cost per barrel. And to be able to reduce the cost per barrel, leveraging the digital know-how, artificial intelligence are very key. And to be able to deploy new platforms. And again, in Schlumberger, we're very proud, of our Delphi, platform, which uses an E&P cognitive environment with a lot of different, let's say, enablement to make the drilling, let's say, operation planning much more efficient, bringing again the expertise of different stakeholders, together on a same digital platform without being in the same place, and also leveraging, the global know-how, and leveraging also, let's say, the capabilities, the digital capabilities that exist. At the same time, in terms on how the planning for operations, because you have to bring in efficiency which is sustainable. So again, looking in terms on how to plan more effectively, the drilling plan, the execution of that drilling operation, and bringing the different stakeholders together are also very key, bright future, development on the digital front. That again, as a company, we had already started and embraced and deploying around the world, and now we are seeing actually a much more accelerated adoption, because again, it really brings in the different stakeholders, the ability of digital computing, and also ability of the experts in the different domains together to really kind of bring in more efficiencies. We also have to look at also very new advanced ways of enabling, let's say, investors for the oil and gas sector. And in terms on how you can help investors in terms of really de-risking their, let's say, investment, and in terms on how they're evaluating their portfolios. And with this, I'm actually very proud also maybe bringing, one example of a unique let's say, project actually that we're doing in Egypt, which is called the Egypt Upstream Gateway. And the Egypt Upstream Gateway is really, a unique platform whereby we're digitalizing the whole of the subsurface, information of Egypt. We are actually enabling, the value-added services and evergreening of that data, with all the latest advancements again in technology, and also enabling, the opportunity of having, bid rounds, and ensuring that you have access and visibility to all of this information for investors actually from wherever they are in the world. And again, this is a key element of how, again, by working together, we can really bring in amazing technology, which really unlocks access to energy for the benefit of all. Another element, which is also very important, and which is why we also see it as a key opportunity, is the human talent. And I think this is something which is very important. And when we talk also about localization, it's very important that we also continue to foster the local talent pool, right, in terms of wherever we are. And also to leverage, again, the situation that we're in, to actually make sure that we actually complement the skill set which exists today for also the needs of tomorrow, in terms of digital know-how, in terms of enablement, in terms of collaboration, spirit, in terms of teamwork, in terms of, technical know-how. And again, this is where, again, there's a big role of, that we can do in terms of doing capacity building, training, and really, with the sector where we work, and also with the different companies, whether, local companies, for example, that we do where we're operating here and so forth. And also maybe my last comment would maybe to also say that this is also an opportunity to bring in this also technology transfer, new business model, and new also models of partnerships. And this is why, again, this is something that we as a company feel very, very proud of, that we are very open-minded, and we're actually exploring also very different avenues on this, in terms on how we can actually bring access to technology to different parts of the world, and also to different countries. And we're very, very happy in terms of obviously what we're doing, here in Egypt. We're also very happy with our plans also in terms of resuming our operations, for example, in Sudan, with through also different business models, and also with all the different, let's say, operations that we have around the world. So I'm very, actually, let's put it this way, excited by the challenges that we are in, although it poses a lot of, let's say, anxiety, to some. However, we all have to see actually the opportunity that it provides for really a better future, for the sector, and actually for the people going forward. So thank you very much, Pauline.
Thank you very much, Karim. And I like also how your presentation focused on the opportunities and the way forward, ensuring that we continue to keep the health and safety of staff as a priority. Digitization is also very important. Putting in place effective planning for efficient operations, and digitizing, de-risking, helping investors to de-risk their operations by, for example, digitizing a lot of the inputs and the information in the sector, and also fostering local talent by providing technology transfer. I'll pick on from the last point I made, building local talent. So we know that COVID-19 has had impact. Companies have lost contracts. It's difficult to proceed with work. But we also know that technology transfer comes with doing the actual work. So my question to you, Mr. Karim, is has Schlumberger in Egypt lost any contract at all, and how has that impacted on technology transfer? We've seen that there's been layoffs by Schlumberger in many countries. I don't know the situation in Egypt. Can you also brief us about how employees are being treated currently in Egypt? Are they, what is the strategy as regards employment and retainment of your staff?
Sure. So I'm actually very happy to say that, our people are really our #1 value. And this is something which is very important, which is why as a company, the investment that we put in the training and development for our employees, it has something which has always been consistent, at all times, whether during high activity levels or through lower activity levels. So of course, when you look at the activity in Egypt or in different parts of the world, I mean, again, it is it has seen also maybe some decline of activity, but there's a huge, let's say, there's a diverse client, let's say, footprint in Egypt, which is why, again, maybe it has not been impacted, as much as, countries where you have maybe only deep water exploration, for example. I mean, in Egypt, environment is quite diverse. There is, exploration, deep water in the Mediterranean. You have, land activity in the Western Desert. You have, again, we're doing also multi-client acquisition, seismic acquisition in the Gulf of Suez. You have the Red Sea, which is also kind of, let's say, a frontier area and so forth. So there is a diversity of activity, which is also really kind of helping us in terms on making sure that, we can reposition in terms on our people, right, where it satisfies, the needs. But the other part, which is very important, like also in what you mentioned, is in terms of, how we can continue developing skill sets, because that engagement can still take place, regardless of the physical activity itself. And this is why I'm also very proud of the engagement that we do with the universities, for example, in Egypt. I mean, we use, we have in Egypt, one of the biggest facilities for Schlumberger in the world. And this facility is over 100,000 actually square meters. And it has state-of-the-art, technology from all the different, let's say, services portfolio that we do have. And we also have, digital enablement in it, whereby we can also do remote training, right, in terms of, through also camera enablement and so forth, to really kind of be able to train and bridge the gap between education, right, and especially for all the young pool of talent, right, all of the students who are today, graduating, this year or maybe graduating next year, it is very important that we play our part to continue helping them, train them, provide them with the best know-how, even though they might not be able to get as much on the hands-on, on the ground due to the activity levels around the world. However, bridging the gap between education and actual industry, latest technology, digital enablement, and the great opportunities that it provides for the future is something that we are very, very proud of. And we have signed, MOUs with several universities in Egypt, with, the ministry and so forth. And we feel very happy about this collaboration. And I take maybe the time to maybe just have one message also for the students out there, right? Or for the pool of talent who today are not working, let's say, in specific companies and so forth, and how, to look into the future. So I really want to really make sure that I go back to my first point, that the sector is a very resilient sector, and the sector is in need of, innovation, is in need of, your talent, and is in need of also your perseverance and grit in terms of, absorbing, information, developing skill sets, coming up with new ideas, and also enabling the digital enablement to really be the future leaders actually of the sector into the future.
Thank you very much, Mr. Badawi. So we have very few minutes to go, and so we'll move on to the questions. I have two specific questions, one for Dalila and one for Ahmad. And then there are general questions that you can all, any of you can respond to, and then we'll end with your last statement. Then the executive director of ACEP will come in. So the question to Dalila is, we've seen how local content is underdeveloped in Sudan, in Angola. We want to know from you, and please speak from your company's perspective and maybe from the perspective of service companies. How practically can Angola foster local content going forward? We see how important it is to develop local content for moments like this, right? So next step going forward, how can local content be developed in Angola? What practical steps can be taken? And while you think about that, Ahmad, I need you to also help us understand how indigenous companies in Sudan can prepare for the future within this COVID era, especially knowing that there is now a repair in the relationship between the US and Sudan, and that creates more opportunities for Sudan than before, right? So with this COVID era, things are down now, but definitely we are optimistic that things will change. Even if things don't change, companies must adapt and move on. So within this context, how can indigenous companies in Sudan take advantage of future opportunities in Sudan and across Africa and the world? And then my general question, any of you can answer, is from your perspective, Egypt, Angola, Sudan, Ghana, how do you see regulators of the upstream oil and gas sector ensuring that local content is fully developed to make sure we can survive, Africa can survive COVID era or any future pandemic? How would you assess or evaluate the effort of the regulators in your various countries? Thank you. So Dalila, please proceed.
Thank you, Pauline.
Sorry, Dalila, please, I give you 1 minute, please. 1 minute to do that. And Amar, 1 minute to do that, please. Thank you.
Okay, so simply put, I think it was Karim who made mention of the commitment from companies to transfer skills and knowledge. So, to transfer technology, right? So it's not just about government, it's also about the commitment from the different companies, because if you localize your activities, that goes a long way in ensuring that there are cost reductions and increases in efficiency. So I think that's, from our perspective, that's what we've really benefited from partners that are willing to really transfer the skills and knowledge and just technology transfer, not viewing us as a competitor, but as a collaborator in an effort to just achieve mutual benefits.
Thank you, Dalila. Amar.
Yeah, I'll take 1 second to answer. Value proposition is the word, actually, but I will use the rest of the minute. So the value proposition is very important. When we say local companies, they always think that the government will give them the right to do the business, which is wrong. We have to present a value as a local companies. This value has to be perceived by the government, by the customers, by the international partner. If we have to develop partners, we have to understand what the value we are bringing to the table. International players, being in US or any part of the world, when we compare it with Africa, they do have an advantage of the intellectual property, for sure. We have to understand this value. Our local part is the demand side. We have to package the demand side. We put a value for what we value are bringing to the table. And combinedly, I can agree with Dalila, I can't agree with more, but definitely we have to have a collaborative way to put together the package to the best of everyone. There's a conflicting points, but they're much less than where we can collaborate together. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Karim, please, do you have anything to say about how the regulators are helping with local content going forward?
No, actually, I think it is a very, very good question, because actually in Egypt, and I really have to give credit to His Excellency Engineer Tariq El Mullah, Minister of Petroleum and Mineral Resources for Egypt, because he has actually led really a program which is called really the modernization program of the oil and gas sector to make it the lead sector in Egypt. And that modernization program has distinct, 7 pillars, which are very clearly defined, and they all lead to actually rallying all the various stakeholders in the sector to work towards that same goal. For example, one of those pillars is investment attraction. One of those pillars is structural reforms. One of those pillars, for example, is in terms on the people front. One of those pillars, for example, is on the upstream technology, on the downstream, and also on the, the digitalization element, right? Or decision support system and the digital enablement of all of that. So I think the answer to your question is I think in Egypt, we're very fortunate that there is a very, let's say, clear commitment, from the top, and having a very clear modernization program that really is enabling the sector to all collaborate, together towards really bringing, energy for the, for the benefit of all.
Thank you so much, Karim. Mr. Fred, do you have any last words?
Yes, I think for regarding the regulators, what they can contribute. I think that we started with nothing, but thankfully enough, now we have a local content act in place, but there's still some more room for improvement. Government have already initiated something we call as rated capacity building and which is quite good. But more importantly, that we need to target certain specific sectors within the energy value chain, so that we'll be able, when these capacities are built, they will not be loitering around looking for a job, but there are specific areas they can go into. I think that is the area I'll be happy PC can look at it. We not just build the capacity and then waiting for the opportunity, but let's target the specific areas within the energy value chain where we think that we can build capacity to utilize them. That is the only thing that I could say to the regulators.
Thank you so much, everyone, for your contribution. We really value them. I'll now leave for the Executive Director to conclude on everything.
Thank you very much, Pauline, and thank you very much, distinguished panelists for today. And after this conversation, I certainly agree that we were right in, having this conversation and appreciating that, the impact could be diverse, the impact cannot be the same. And listening to various speakers, I have really learned a lot, and I hope the many participants who joined us also have learned quite a lot. But just to, in a minute, try to tease out some of the key issues that have emerged and some of the learnings and the strategies that have emerged. Really, we've seen that upstream down to service companies, a lot of adjustments have had to be made. Exploration has been impacted. Investment is not the same. And therefore, everybody is taking a hit across the industry. Some contracts have been suspended and force majeure has been activated, which countries are not happy with, but that is what the industry is demanding at this point. Position of companies and countries, and also those downstream have also been extremely impacted. But through it all, there are ways of doing things differently that are emerging. Companies are having to adapt to technology to ensure that business can continue. Working from home has become a new way of doing things, and companies may stay to some extent the same, even beyond the COVID. It's been difficult to do away with some of the critical stuff that you need to be on site and to work. And strategies around them is to try and ensure that you are isolating them, you are testing, you are working beyond the industry, which tend to be more of an enclave now to deal with disease control, mitigation, and treatment agencies to ensure that you can respond quickly when there is an infection, and as much as possible isolate workers and limit. We're seeing the in actually providing risk mechanisms from. So these that we need to take away. There are some distinctive issues that we would have to look at. Some companies have shown to be much more resilient, particularly the service companies. The smaller ones are taking much bigger hits. Some have already gone under. Some are taking advantage of the situation also to get access to consultancies at a cheaper rate and remain resilient. But those who are not as strong as they should are really going under. So that brings up the lesson as to how those ones can be supported either by government, or the industry to prop them up through flexible contract arrangements, for them to survive in this difficult times. I hear the bigger strategy also for Africa, where we need to now rethink the supply chain, and not necessarily within the context of globalization, thinking that we need to do things in Africa, but how do we also attract some of these supply chain movers, to now begin to position themselves in Africa, so that in situations such as this, we can readily make available the needed supplies to the industry. So African governments to begin look at how do we facilitate and ensure that infrastructure is available to accelerate those kind of investments, and also make it easy for services to move and allow the supply chain to be optimal within our context. So the pandemic has shaped the industry. It's not going to be the same, but we need to keep learning, particularly as Africans. I mean, the pandemic could have implications if it turns out to be peculiar to the continent. Now it's a global situation, and therefore we're having to have support from many other regions. But if it happens to be like Ebola on this scale, the impact could be much more grave, and we then have to begin to think deeply about how do we resolve some of these challenges by working collaboratively to ensure that we can be robust in our response and ensure that at all times the industry will be protected and sustain the fiscal positions of our countries, because many countries are really suffering from the downtime, and rethinking is much critical. So on this, I just want to thank everyone who time to visit. The conversation will be going on. We will distill the key issues and share and see how we can deepen the very specifics into the future and ensure that we can together build a much more resilient oil and gas industry in Africa. Thank you very much, and stay blessed.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.
It was a pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Great meeting everyone. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We know we will. We are going, heaven knows where we are going, but we know we will get there. Get there. Boom, boom, T-boom, T-boom, boom, boom. Boom, boom, T-boom, T-boom, boom, boom. We will get there. Heaven knows how we will get but we know we will get there. Boom, boom, ti-boom, ti-boom, boom, boom. Boom, boom, ti-boom, ti-boom, boom, boom. It will be hard, we know, that the road will be muddy and rough, but we will get there. Heaven knows how we will get there. We know we will get there. Boom, boom, ti-boom, ti-boom, boom, boom. Boom, boom, ti-boom, ti-boom, boom, boom. It will be hard, we know, that the road will be muddy and rough, but we will get there. Heaven knows. We know we will. We will get there. Heaven knows how we will get there. But we know we will.